All right, welcome everybody to this month's Community Roundtable Discussion. If this is your first time attending one of these events are designed to bring together industry practitioners to talk about important topics, hot topics that people are interested in our industry. And the goal is to highlight and elevate voices of people who are actually working in the industry, doing the things that they're talking about, and actually have the experience to back it up. And so for this month, I am so happy to have this wonderful group of L&D hiring managers and leaders from all across the industry, where we'll be talking about salaries and how much people in this industry earn and how much they make. And this is an important topic because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And for anyone who's trying to transition into this industry, it's probably something that has been bouncing around in your head at least a little bit. So welcome everybody. Before we jump in, let's do a quick around the table introductions. If you don't mind, for my panel, introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about where you live, what you do for a living, the type of team you manage, or anything else you'd like to share. So who would like to go first?
Sure.
Go ahead, Tracie.
Tracie Cantu. I live in Austin, Texas. I've worked in learning and HR across a variety of industries for about 20 years now, and it's gone by like this, honestly. I'm currently the head of enterprise learning ecosystems for a US-based tech company. We recently reorged, so my previous team was a mix of full-time employees, contingent workers, and BPO, which is a business process outsource vendor. There were about 70 of them who would manage like our cornerstone administration and such like that, for those of you who aren't familiar with the BPO model.
Very good. Thank you, Tracie. All right, who'd like to go next?
I'll go ahead and go next. My name is Laurel Schulert. Thank you. I began my career many years ago, like I assume many of you on this call, as a high school teacher or a classroom teacher, and found my way to instructional design after several years in the classroom. Currently, I'm the director of learning experience at a large software company. I lead a team of 9 people. We have 7 instructional designers. We have 1 full-time LMS admin who takes on a couple of other roles as well. And we have 1 technical writer on the team. I've been with this organization almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years next week. And I came up through the team. So I was hired in as a designer, was promoted to senior designer, and then got promoted to manager just over 2 years ago. And I've now hired all 9 people who report to me. So I've had lots of opportunities to talk salary in the last couple of years. So great topic. And just thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laurel. All right, Daila or Cara, who would like to go next?
I'll go next. My name is Daila Boufford, and I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and a half outside of Philadelphia. And I came into the wonderful world of instructional design from market research because I found that one of the most favorite parts I enjoyed about market research was training my clients how to understand market research. So that's how I came into it. I've held a number of different roles, both as a full-time instructional designer and also as a contract instructional designer. I've also worked for a global organization hiring instructional designers, both full-time and contract, from a global basis. And currently I am a training manager at a financial tech firm and manage a team of 9 training facilitators. So I've got a lot of different things in my background, and I'm eager to converse with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daila. All right, and last but not least, Cara North. Hi, Cara.
Hello. Hey, Tim. Hey, everyone. I am Cara North, and I've been doing learning and development this is my 14th year, which is kind of bananas to think about. And I've worked in a bunch of different industries. Actually started in a call center, then I got recruited, and I did ID at a FANG, a very large company, and then I transitioned from that to higher education, and then I transitioned from higher education to manufacturing, where I've been the last 2 years, and I am getting ready to transition into a healthcare role. So I'm going around the gamut of different industries for learning and development. So my most recent role in manufacturing, I'm an operations training manager. I have a team of 8. So very much like Laurel, I selected all of them and very proud of them, and I get all excited, seeing their growth and everything. But yeah, same as Laurel, I've talked a lot of money, salary, and I am also going to share, just to get this conversation started, 4 of my team members, this is their very first learning and development role. So I just want to put that out there that yes, new people actually do get jobs. So I just want to nip that in the bud. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talk all things money and jobs.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm going on my 14th year as well in this industry, and that's crazy town. I'm having like a career midlife crisis, maybe. I don't know. All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. And real quickly, let me mention this. If anyone happens to be watching this recording on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you can get alerted the next time I publish a video like this one. All right. So I was thinking about how to start this conversation, and I was thinking back to when we first all got together. It was like a month and a half or 2 months ago when I proposed the idea of doing this. And really where the source of this came from, not just this particular session, but the community roundtables in general, is that, there's so many people trying to get into our industry or transition into our industry, whether it's, current or former teachers. And I've seen every other industry of people trying to transition. And as a result of that, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what skills you need and on how much you can expect to earn as a brand new instructional designer or e-learning developer, or even a mildly experienced instructional designer or e-learning developer or learning professional in general. And so my first question I want to know is, I'm curious to hear from the panel, and whoever wants to go first, feel free to speak up. I want to know what are some of the common myths you've seen or experienced either recently or in your career about salaries in the world of L&D. Let's start there, and then we'll go from there.
I think I'm old enough to remember when starting out, they were like, well, you teach, so your pay is comparable. Where now we're hearing the myth of the pay is so much more, where it's like, oh no, it's still education. I remember in the late 90s, that was the salary conversation of they pay teachers X, so we'll give you 5,000 to 10,000 more than that since you're in corporate America. But teachers X was pretty low. So it's interesting how that myth has come full circle now.
So the myth was that, being an instructional designer is equivalent or maybe a step up from being a teacher. So you're just going to get a little bit more than a teacher, right?
Yep.
That is well, and I think that that's definitely true. I've seen that also when, if your primary role is facilitation or instruction, that oftentimes has been equated to being a teacher. What other myths have you heard or seen?
So one of the things that I think we dealt with a lot is that instructional things are people, and people equate that to a certain different type of pay. And so one of the first questions that I always ask when I'm interviewing someone is, what does instructional design mean to you? Within this holistic umbrella of instructional and learning design, how would you define your space? Because there are some skills that are just going to demand a higher pay rate than others, and they all fall under this title of instructional design. But I think that there's a lot more nuance to it than some might realize when they're first getting into the industry.
Yeah, and Laurel, before I know you were speaking, I think there was a bit of a delay, so I apologize. But let me quickly tack onto that, Daila. I think it kind of gets conflated with the confusion, like you said, about what it means to be an instructional designer. There are roles that you could look at, 10 different job descriptions for instructional designer and have 10 very, very different roles, even under that umbrella, right? And one might be handling way more senior level stuff than another, or doing completely different work with different skill sets, and often and of course in different locations and different companies and different stakeholders, and that demands different levels of compensation. Absolutely. Laurel, go ahead. Sorry.
And no, it's okay. Thank you. I wouldn't say that I've seen too much in the way of myths, but I think a really common experience is just simply not knowing how to research salaries, not knowing how to get that information, particularly when you are making a drastic career change. For most of us here in the US, public education salaries are public information. You can literally Google teacher pay in whatever state, and there's a spreadsheet right there. Even in higher education, that's again, public salaries is publicly available. When you're going to a corporate setting, it's really difficult unless you have an in and somebody who's willing to be pretty transparent with you. It's difficult to get that information. So where I haven't seen a lot of myths, I've just seen a lot of confusion and people not knowing if they're lowballing or high estimating or really placing themselves in the correct bracket for what should be appropriate for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, Laurel. Thank you. Cara, any myths
that's what we're trying to address today, I think. So
yeah,
we will
absolutely.
get there.
Yeah, we'll get there for sure. Sorry, Cara, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was going to say a myth that I saw, and I got a little bit of heat because I fought against it. But I think there's this myth that if you go to a FANG company, which is like a Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, that you're going to get not only this incredible salary, but this real romanticized job where you get to do all this stuff. And the comment that I kind of bucked against was somebody said, oh, if you work there, it's like you're getting a second degree and you get to do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, what was your experience working there? And they hadn't worked there. Oh, well, I've talked to people. Well, I'm telling you, your mileage may vary. There are so many different reasons why someone may have a certain experience over another person. In my experience, it matters where you sit in the business, kind of what your little piece of the L&D pie is. So there's all these different things that can happen. And that's good advice for any company, truly, is trying to get that information. But I'm really kind of sick of seeing the romanticized vision of, oh, you can only get great experience and big numbers at these large companies. I think that's a big myth.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, all of us know this on this call, but these companies, these FANG companies, or any company that's likely a publicly traded company, there are literally thousands or sometimes tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees there. And you can work under the umbrella of that company and have very different experiences in your pay and in your how much your engagement in that position or that job. There's a lot of variables that go into that for sure. I'll say my besides, we're going to talk, I have a whole section dedicated talking about this mythical $100,000 entry-level instructional designer job myth. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I think the myth that I have seen, and I learned the truth about this myth once I got into a leadership role where I was managing teams and having to make offers for candidates, is I think there's a myth, and I'll admit I've been guilty of buying into it, that if a company really wants you, they'll find the money to pay you whatever you want. And while I have seen that happen in some instances, hiring managers have far less control over pay than I think some people think. There's a lot more variables that go into how somebody's paid and what they're offered. And oftentimes it's outside of the control of that direct hiring manager. And we can talk a little bit more about that as well. Okay, good. Now that we got that out of the way, and I think that we've talked a little bit about some of the topics I want to address today, let's jump into our first category of topics I want to focus on, which is, I think, probably going to be one of the most valuable bits of advice for anybody who's currently interviewing or looking to land a job, is researching salaries and researching and determining what somebody's value might be. One of the things that I've tried to promote recently with folks looking to land an instructional design or e-learning job is that it's incumbent upon them to understand how an instructional designer is paid within their market or for that type of company or for their level of experience. It is your job to figure that out. And so I'm curious to know, based on your experience, what tips would you provide for others on how to go about researching salaries and going about making informed conclusions about how you figure out your worth, or what data is data that you can rely upon, or what data you should be, more skeptical of? Thoughts on that?
A great source in my experience for those who are based in the US is BLS.gov. That's the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, for what that stands for. And it's literally the federal reporting of, exactly what people make. To my knowledge, I don't believe they actually have instructional designer as a job description in there, but you can find comparable titles and job descriptions that sound more relevant. Of course, there's other industry experts like Learning Guild. I saw someone just posted in the chat. They have a salary report. ATD, the Association for Talent Development, does a salary report. I believe it's restricted to members only, but that is an option out there. I always love the good old asking people in your network. If you're courageous enough to have that conversation, and if they're open and transparent enough to have that conversation with you, see if you have any LinkedIn connections who work somewhere, and see if they would be approachable and maybe helping you get an idea. I'm someone who in my personal life, I'm fairly transparent about these things because at the end of the day, this is why we're all working. And it helps everyone make a really informed decision about whether this opportunity is the right one for them or not.
I agree with that. Tracie, I know you in the past have shared information about websites like Glassdoor or Monster.com, which are employee, I forget the term, but it's employee self-reported data versus employer-reported data. Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance between those two?
This is where the HR nerd in me will come out. When you look at salaries and you go on, let's go pay scale, they have two different data pools. PayScale has the self-reported data pool, and then they have the data pool they charge companies for to do market compensation research to determine salary bands. If you have a SHRM membership, you can actually access PayScale's database, and this is still a lot, but it can save you in the long run. You can pull for about $230 the market compensation research band for the role you're looking at. I did it for instructional design, executives, training directors, VPs, because you're right, you don't know what the over-under conversation is, or if you're pricing yourself out of the market or underpricing yourself, because let's be honest, it's day 2 of International Women's Month, and we all know that 4 out of 5 of us here are paid less than our male counterparts. And if we were persons of color, we'd be even significantly more underpaid. So going in with that knowledge is power. Market compensation aggregators are very different than self-reported. Keep that in mind, because a self-reported site, you don't know if they're posting their total comp or just their base salary. And that's why you have these giant swings of rates. And just a little soapbox. I am a Kentucky girl at heart here, so my union-ish will show. The National Labor Relations Board have clearly stated it is illegal to prevent employees from discussing their wages with each other.
That's fascinating.
So it is prohibited for companies to have policies prohibiting this. And I will drop that link in the chat because, one, we have to talk about this more, especially women and persons of color, in order to start overcoming that discrepancy in pay, that bias is put into place. So you can talk. And if you're uncomfortable, I always recommend the over-under conversation. I'd be like, Laurel, do you make more than $95,000? And she'd be like, no. I'd be like, do you make under $80,000? She'd be like, oh, hell no. Then I know that working in Laurel's profession in her company is right within my salary comfort zone, without actually saying, Laurel, what do you make every year? Which may feel uncomfortable, but that's the kind of, if you need to dance, the over-under is a great dance to have for networking.
I've never thought of that. I love that tip. And I think, you also have to be prepared that there's a burden in knowing. You might discover you are severely underpaid, and you got to figure out what you're going to do with that if you find out you're severely underpaid, right? Cara, Daila, anything else you'd like to add to that about researching salaries or anything Tracie or Laurel mentioned?
I was just going to add a tip. Now, this isn't as much as research, but if you see a job that you're interested in and you get that first screening, kind of my little pro tip is ask that recruiter what the salary range is. You'll find 9 times out of 10, they won't bat an eyelash about it. And especially if you are the one driving that conversation, that gives the power back to you versus that dreaded, like your palms are like sweaty, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to tell them what my number is, or I don't know what my number is. Usually that way you get at least a good sense if it is something that fits for you or would be a good next step for you. So that's kind of my pro tip, is ask them in that screening interview and make sure you get it out of your mouth before they do.
I agree. And I want to talk about that real quickly. But Daila, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's in everyone's best interest to have that conversation early on, right? Because otherwise the recruiter might be wasting their time and you might be wasting your time. So I would strongly second that. Have the courage to ask. Secondly, one thing that I have seen due to our wonderful pandemic and all of the remote jobs now available is that some states do require the salary range to be posted within the job description. So that has been lovely. So you can go in and look, and even if that's not necessarily the job that you're looking at to apply to, if it's somewhat similar, it gives you a good idea. So always be open to kind of looking at all types of jobs that are in that area of what you're looking for, and see if there's salaries posted, and that can help out.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe Colorado is one of those states. I don't know if Oregon is, but I know Colorado requires salary ranges to be.
New York City too.
New York City. Okay.
Hot tip.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Remote jobs. If you've looked at jobs, you'll be like, why is XYZ company posting 17 times the same role? Because they're trying to hit the market. So find the one that says Denver or New York City and look at that, because that's where the disclosure will be, not on the
smart.
Tucson or the Houston.
That's very smart. I love that tip. Okay, good. And I think speaking of pay transparency, I mean, this is going to be a good segue into what I want to talk about. At the end of the day, I think it's important for candidates to know that I'm not going to say every, because I don't know this to be true, but in my experience, every position, every job posting, there is a pay range. There is a pay range for what they're going to offer. And in addition to that pay range, that hiring manager has a budget within that pay range that they can offer that candidate. And so pay transparency, a lot of companies, I know my employer I used to work at, they just had a pay transparency initiative. It's the benefit of everybody, especially Tracie, as you were mentioning, women and people of color and people who've been historically, my camera just went off. Give it 1 second. People have been historically underpaid.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. It sometimes goes off. It likes to do that. So let me ask this real quickly as a segue, talking about that. As hiring managers who have had to make offers and determine how much you want to offer a candidate, what are some of the variables that go into that offer that you might make for a candidate, in a hiring situation? What are some of the variables that maybe candidates aren't aware of that go into that?
So if I can, I'd like to tackle this from an agency, right?
Sure.
Who's often the middleman, and you're hiring a contractor. So you're going to manage that contractor for the client that's ultimately hiring you, which is the role that I was in most often. And at the end of the day, it's about making a smart decision that is going to benefit not only your end client, but your agency as well. Like, everyone wants to win here. And so some of the things that, we really took into mind when deciding on what that rate was going to be was how much work are we going to have to do to manage this instructional designer? Like, is this person coming off as someone who can, interact directly with a client, knows how to communicate, knows how to kind of put that hat on, which is very, very different than just being an internal staff member at a company and not having to put that customer facing hat on and interact in a certain way. So that's one thing that, I definitely explore when I interviewed folks, is their ability to do that. And then that would ultimately kind of affect the rate that we would offer.
I love that. So the salaries correlates to how much of your time is it going to take to, I don't want to say hold that person's hand, but that you're going to have to help that person in their role in their job. I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? What other variables might go into the offers you make?
One that I've had come up is the equity balance of the organization. So we know somebody that comes in at a certain level in the company makes around this to this. If we go higher, how does that impact other people in the organization at that level? Is that something that we need to think about? Well, maybe it's time to pump up the salary for people, or is it something that is just not going to work out with the way that the organization is currently compensated? So I don't think a lot of people think about that. They're like, oh, hire me, I'm the best, which you very well could be. But at least in my experience, it's really mattered about what's the compensation models look like in the organization. And if we bring this person in, will it dilute the equity of the pay for other people?
Cara, that's a fantastic point, because it's a complex algorithm to balance pay across an organization to make it equitable across all bands. But that brings me to a thought of every salary range has a top, and that is a ceiling for that range. And I am very hesitant to hire somebody at the very top of that range, not because they're not the most freaking talented person in the world, but because they're going to quickly become dissatisfied by the lack of pay raises that they will achieve, and potentially the lack of promotion, because promotion is usually a lagging indicator in most industries, and they're going to have to sit stale and stagnant in that pay range for a lot longer than they'd be comfortable with. So sometimes it's not necessarily because you're not the best for the role, it's because we feel that we wouldn't be the best for you where you're at.
Right, because everyone wants want everyone to be happy, right? Go ahead, Laurel.
We have the same conversations in my organization. So we have pay bands, exactly what it sounds like. It's the minimum threshold and the top threshold for what you can hire somebody in at. But not only that pay band extends to their tenure in that position. And so we make those pay bands available to all of our employees. So of course you don't see it at the point of offer, but once you're on board, there's a portal you can go and you can look that up where it's not publicly available externally. Employees quickly learn once they're here where they fall within their pay band. So then we have those conversations about why someone is low, mid, or high. And to Tracie's point, we don't bring in candidates at the high end of the pay band, not because we're trying to be unfair or unjust or lowball them, but because there's not a lot of room for growth within that role or within that band once they're here, if they're already bumping up against the ceiling. So when I think about where somebody falls, low to mid in the pay band, I factor in things like, of course, experience, of course, education. Daila's point, how much, I hate to use the phrase, but hand-holding will this person need? How independently will they be able to operate? That's a factor. I think a lot of, going back to the myths, there are some conversations around, well, if you build a really great portfolio, you can demand a higher salary. It's true and not true. I call out portfolios twice in the job description that I use. Once literally in the requirements and once in the general job description. And that's a pretty big clue that I expect my applicants who I interview to have a portfolio included in their resume. So for me, that portfolio is like the gateway to even getting the interview in the first place. I can honestly never say portfolio has influenced a salary decision because it's much more than that. By the time I've had multiple interviews, multiple conversations, they've met my team through the interview process. There's a lot of factors that go into salary beyond just portfolio. But that portfolio is sort of the gate in the door to open that conversation with me and my team.
That's such a great point, because I think people have conflated the quality of their portfolio with how much they think they can demand. And that might be true in some instances, like, for example, with freelancing, that might be true. My rate is, I adjust my rate according to the quality of my portfolio, right? That's one example. But at the end of the day, that job has a pay range. And so I think that what's important about this conversation, and not just about portfolios, is that if you go in for an interview and you don't get the offer that you're hoping for, it doesn't always necessarily mean that they're trying to undervalue you. It just might mean that what you're looking for from a salary standpoint doesn't align with what that company can offer right now, right? And to everyone's point, people don't want to offer right at the top not because they're trying to devalue you, but because they want you to be happy in the long run, right? Not to say that people don't get devalued. I mean, there's obviously examples of that. We were talking about it, but there's a lot more that goes into an offer than just how much somebody perceives your value to be. Good. Any other thoughts, epiphanies, tips about some of the variables that go into pay offers or pay ranges?
Hold on. One of them does.
I want to echo what Tracie.
Go ahead, Tracie, and then Laurel.
Sorry, Laura.
I'll echo what.
First, Laurel. Market.
Yes.
Boston versus Little Rock.
Yeah. Right.
100K in Boston will probably buy you about the same as 50K in Little Rock. So while it may seem that the offer is less than what you got from like a company in Boston versus a remote company in Little Rock, they're basing it off their market rates. So don't understand your cost of living and how it balances out and what bang you can get for your buck. Because the salaries might actually be comparable when you factor in cost of living, though on paper they don't look like it.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be our next topic, but go ahead, Laurel.
That's a really great point. Also wanted to echo what Tracie put in the chat about the Articulate eLearning Heroes. I was actually drafting a similar post and just didn't hit send fast enough. There's really great ways to build portfolios using non-proprietary, non-classified information. So definitely look at opportunities for that.
Yeah, let me add that about portfolios too. It's kind of a separate topic, but it always gets brought up because it's the hot thing right now. And we talked about this in the last community roundtable when we were talking about hiring and interviewing. The thing about portfolios I want everyone to remember is that the quality of a portfolio is only as good as your ability to actually apply those skills on the job. And what I mean by that is a portfolio should be an accurate reflection of what you can do right now, not what you might be able to develop, hopefully do, and fake it till you make it when you get hired. And so keep that in mind, that a good-looking portfolio is great. Every hiring manager wants to see a good-looking portfolio, but you have to be able to back it up and walk the walk when you get hired, not just, you use the trial version of Storyline for 30 days and created a demo. Well, that's not the same as you can use Storyline right now if that's what they need from you. I know nobody likes to hear that, but that's the truth. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if I could just tack onto that, now that Rise has so many of these templates with real content, I cannot tell you LinkedIn, people putting their portfolios, oh, look at me. I have seen countless templates from Articulate, no edits made. So if you think that hiring managers are stupid to that fact, maybe some of them are, but I know this one isn't. So make sure that it's your own work.
Agreed. I shared the story, I think last time, I don't remember. I once had an interview with a candidate who shared their portfolio, and the example they had in a portfolio was a template I created and shared on the Articulate community years prior. It was very awkward for that individual. I had a good laugh out of it, and I still have a good laugh about it.
One thing I just want to add to this discussion, and again, where I was coming from, we had instructional designers that focused on putting together the design, meaning the vision, the idea, how this was going to go, the high level design, right? And then we had teams of developers and graphic designers and, other folks who would actually do the building. So what I would also say is that, one of the things I always looked for when someone had a portfolio was, how clever are you being? Where is your creativity as a instructional designer really coming through versus your talent in graphic design or your talent in, being able to build this great interactive. I was much more interested in the way that you thought about the learning solution and how you would engage the learners and welcome them into that space, whether it was through storytelling or something like that. So just another thing to throw in there when you're trying to craft your portfolio.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is and undoubtedly somebody's going to ask this in the questions So sorry, I don't know if it was Laurel or Cara who was going to go next, but my question I want to ask is, and maybe Laurel, you're going to share this. What are some of the things that you do look for in portfolios? But Laurel, go ahead, and then we'll answer that question.
That's exactly where I was going, Tim.
Good,
So great
good.
segue. A couple things I look for, that craft to the design that Daila just spoke of. It's hard to describe in words, but you know it when you see it. Something clever, something interesting. There's some chatter in the chat about clicky clicky bling bling. I'm not so much looking for that. Not looking for bells and whistles, but like artistry in the design, evidence of critical thinking in the design. Something a few candidates who've applied for roles in my team have done that I really appreciate. They put a little narrative of why they chose this portfolio piece, why they made the design decisions they made. I have a question that I ask in interviews, but tell me about a piece in your portfolio and why you chose that for your portfolio, and what did you learn when you were building this? What successes or challenges did you have in building this? So I love to see reflection. Something else that I think portfolios, and I'm a little old school, so cover letters too, portfolios and cover letters really do well is highlight writing samples. There's a lot of writing when you're on the job as an instructional designer. That first D in ADDIE is all about the design and the actual writing. You have to take a lot of SME's information that is not always polished and really make it into something engaging and interesting. So the more I can see a candidate's writing samples, throughout the interview process, that helps me make hiring decisions, not salary decisions, but it helps me make hiring decisions.
Absolutely. Good. Cara, Tracie, what do you look for in portfolios?
So for me, I start with a resume portfolio comparison. So I feel like your resume is you telling me what, and your portfolio is you're showing me. So if you're telling me over here that you can use Storyline and Captivate and whatever you can do, and I see nothing of that in your portfolio, that's a red flag. Second red flag is any intellectual property of any company that you worked for in your portfolio, automatic do not hire. Company that I'm transitioning out of, our NDA is very wicked. We're in the manufacturing space, and I am not going to take a risk on somebody who might leak the plans on how we make something out there and it get to a competitor. It would be my head on a platter, and I'm not really willing to risk that. And then to Laurel's point, I love the narrative, and I think that design is a process. I love seeing wireframes, storyboards. I love knowing what questions you asked to that person going through it. And I especially love to know how you evaluated it and what your assessment looks like. But that's just my little nerdy soapbox for another day. But those are the things that I look for in a portfolio. And there was a question about where it's hosted. I don't care if it's Google Sites personally. I think as long as it's something that I can go through and look at. I am also not a fan of doing a design challenge during the interview. I think that that's really unfair for a lot of people because one, I found that a lot of times they don't give good instructions around it. So someone may be at an advantage if maybe they have access to tools versus people that don't have access to tools. Two, it assumes everyone has the same amount of time. Maybe not. I mean, who knows what somebody's got going on in their personal life. I know myself, I'm a very busy person. I don't know if I could carve out extra 4 or 5 hours to make something on the side. But and then three, you don't really get any feedback most of the time when you submit it into kind of the land of where no one responds back. I've had several friends do stuff like that. And it's like, well, why did they waste their time for nothing? So that's just my little side bar there. But
yeah, I was just talking with somebody the other day, and they were given a design challenge, and they were given they had to create a storyboard and develop the course and storyline from scratch with the content they provided, and they were given like 2 hours. And that's craziness.
Walk away.
Right? Yeah, that's extreme. Tracie, anything else you want to add to that about portfolios?
I actually look for the portfolio to reflect the skills I'm asking for in the job.
Yeah.
Because I am going to tie it to your compensation and your hire offer. I want to actually see that you have critical thinking, that you can speak in a coherent voice. And also, am I engaged? Because our learners, I care. That's how I always joke. I care, and I got bored with this e-learning. So if I got bored, what is the learner who's being forced to take this because we pushed a compliance course going to feel? So I think of all of those things, and that's going to be the secret sauce when it comes to comparing at the end. Like if I have apples to apples, that's going to push me over. And that's also going to make me advocate more for a little extra in that salary band.
Yep. I totally agree. And I think the other thing to remember, the thing that strikes me as we're having this conversation about portfolios, and I've talked about this before, depending on the role and what that hiring manager is looking for, they're going to be looking at different things in that portfolio that they're looking from you as a candidate. And I think it's incumbent upon the candidate for you to know where your talents lie and what your specialties are. I always say your portfolio should reflect the type of work you enjoy doing, the type of work you want to be doing, and the type of work you want to be paid for. And every position, every job, that's going to be a little bit different. The goal is to find that employer that aligns with those things that you want to be doing, right? And making sure you're highlighting that in your portfolio. Let me ask this final question about portfolios, and then we'll get back to salary stuff. I'm curious to know, Cara, you brought up a great point about, using examples from previous employers. Obviously, if you're going to do that, make sure you get permission, but most employers are probably not going to let you post it. What is everyone's thoughts about people, creating their own sample projects for their portfolio? And what are you looking for, knowing that when somebody creates a sample project, they probably didn't get a chance to implement it or measure it? How do you view that as a hiring manager?
That's a great question. I think even if it's in fantasy land, they should have some indications of what they would ask in an evaluation to an end user, or they would have indications on what they would ask. So I had a little project that I put out for people to do. I found an old training manual for, I think, people that farmed tea in a country. And I said, hey, here's this ugly training manual. Here's an opportunity to take it and maybe make some portfolio pieces with it. Because, I mean, that's a real life thing that happens, this old legacy thing on a shelf somewhere. So I was like, oh, yep, we need to revitalize that. And that needs to get back out there, y'all. So, I mean, that happens in real life. So for something like that, I think, asking general questions or like having information about what you would ask. But at the end of the day, especially if you're making something mock, I like to know you as a person. I remember portfolios that I have looked at where I learn about, if someone else likes video games or someone likes farming. I mean, I think there is nothing wrong with bringing you into your portfolio. I found that those are the ones that have been most memorable for me when I'm reviewing, when I remember a little bit about that person. And then, you get to know the human, because I am a firm believer. I like to hire someone for their heart. I can't make you a good person. I want to work with good people. I can help you with kind of all your other stuff, but heart is like my number one thing that I look for. And then of course the skills and everything, but heart's really important to me.
Yeah. I agree. Tracie, Daila, Laurel, anything you'd like to add to that about people, creating their own sample projects with sample topics?
I'm all for it. I work for a software company, and my designers and my team create sales training, how to sell software. In the past year, I've hired people who had portfolio pieces on how to make salsa, how to repair a bike, how to grow tomatoes, how to reheat pizza. The topic in your portfolio does not matter. I want to see finesse. I want to see skill of design, presentation style. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I've told this story countless times before, and many of you have heard this, but I remember I had one person I was mentoring, and they were really concerned about their topic, and they were going to do a topic on how to apply eyeliner. And the person said, yeah, but it's not a business topic. And my response was, well, what's a business topic? For Estee Lauder, that's a business topic. For people who work in cosmetic stores, that's a business topic. Same thing. I had somebody talking about they wanted to do a course on how to make lattes, and it's not a business topic. I'm like, well, for Starbucks, that's a business topic, right? It's less about the topic, it's how you frame it. Tracie, I see you raising your finger. Go ahead.
Some of the folks I've mentored have asked, I need to get experience doing this in ID. Mm-hmm. And I've always encouraged them, volunteer your skills. We might not have the checking account to volunteer and give back, but we have the skill set. So go to a food bank, go to a social justice topic you're really passionate about. Ask do you need help revising your training? Do you need help building a training? Because that's the kind of stuff, because they are a nonprofit, That stuff is publicly available. You can cite it on your resume. You're giving back to a cause you're passionate about, and you can use it as a portfolio piece. So it's a triple win in a way with that. And it gains you experience that you might not have gotten in your 9-to-5 role.
And you get to tell a great story.
Yeah. And holy crap, just giving back to your community and something you're passionate about is always a great day.
Yeah. Karen, I think you've done that before. Nyla Spooner with Design by Humanity. She does that. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Another thing, just to jump in real quick, but another thing you can do is offer to train your team. Like, even if you're not working in ID, maybe there's some kind of process or some kind of trick in Excel or something. Like, it could be anything, right? And offer that up to your manager. Like, hey, I've discovered this thing. I'd really love to put together just a quick, how-to or whatever for the team on how to use this. You can sell the benefits of doing that to your manager, and then you get that experience. And then that even lets you take it into that evaluation phase and that type of thing. So it doesn't have to be this big, huge, formal project. It can be something really simple. People are always open to, again, you volunteering to do something that they don't feel like doing that's actually going to give a benefit. So
good. All right. I know that we kind of took a deep segue into portfolios there, but it's always a popular topic. And I think the conclusion we should walk away with is portfolios might play in hiring decisions, but they may not always play in salary decisions. That's not always true, but that seems to be some of the consensus. Let's talk about the mystical, coveted $100,000 instructional design job. I don't know if anyone else has ever, seen that mentioned out there before, and it kind of segues about portfolios because it's usually mentioned in the context of if you build an amazing portfolio, you can expect to earn 120K as an instructional designer. Despite the fact that the data doesn't show that, but I guess that's part of the conversation. But I don't know, what's everyone's reaction to that? Does that exist? Is it exist for everybody? Thoughts, opinions?
Something I've been thinking about with this is somebody doesn't know how to do quarterly tax withholdings as a freelancer, and they see that hourly rate and they're like, I'm making 125,000. You are, but there's tax implications.
There's a lot of tax, trust me.
So technically, that is a caveat of truth, but it exists. $100,000 ID job does exist, even at the entry level. But you're looking at LA, New York City, Boston, Seattle. And your cost of living is going to probably be the equivalent of a $50,000 role in Cincinnati. So, in the words of Biggie Small, more money, more problems.
Yes. Well, so yeah, as a freelancer, yes. I mean, it's not hard to make over $100,000 as a freelancer, but you don't get benefits, you don't get retirement, you don't get a 401k match. You're paying for that out of pocket, and I pay my own self-employment tax, and about 40% of all the money I earn goes back to taxes. And I live, in Phoenix and Arizona. We have low state taxes compared to some other states. So that's really important to know. And I think when you say, Tracie, more money, more problems, $100,000 job comes with $100,000 responsibilities and expectations. What are some of those that comes? What are you expecting from somebody who's making six figures? And I don't know if it's regardless of location. I agree with you
strategic business impact.
Okay.
You are if I'm paying six figures, I know, because you're starting to get into that anywhere from senior manager to senior director level.
Right.
And that requires you to zoom out, forecast business opportunities, and where you as a learning and development professional can have an impact driving the profit margin and creating strategic roadmaps to implement.
Yep.
And that's not fresh out of an ID certificate program kind of level. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody just coming out of that, to get hopped into that job and be like, oh crap, what did I get myself into?
Yep, I agree. Go ahead. Sorry, whoever was going to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, when you get to that level, there's a certain amount of assumed thick skin that you have to have, because you're going to get yourself into situations, like it or not, where you're going to be the scapegoat because someone is mad and they've got to blame it on someone, and you're probably hitting that mid-manager, senior manager range, and that's what that role is all about. It is, it's almost like, and I'm just saying this half thinking it now, but it's like the higher your pay goes, the higher the bigger your bucket is for taking on problems of others. So there's a lot that goes along with that. And so, yeah, I think the expectations are much higher for performance, for time, for impact, and for ability to just slog through and know that not every day is going to be a rainbow day.
Yeah, sometimes it's going to be a shit day. That's what it's going to be. And you got to pretend like it's a rainbow day. Sorry. Laurel, Cara, anything you're going to add to that?
This is a question we see from time to time on my team of, even the difference from how do you distinguish a regular designer from a senior designer? Again, I go back to the education and experience that would have landed someone that position in the first place. But to build on what Daila said, less margin of error, higher demands, higher intensity, higher pressure. The projects that have to be a slam dunk on the first shot because there's a VP on the back end who's sponsoring this, something like that. And so, Tim, Tracie, I think I've heard you both use the phrase, with a six-figure job comes six-figure problems. And it's not all problematic. Some people really like those challenges and are really hungry for those opportunities. But it's not a job that you can just coast in and maintain status quo.
Go ahead, Cara, if you were going to say something. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with her. The other thing, too, about the elusive six-figure job is, that could be salary, but it could be a part of salary. And we haven't really discussed kind of bonus structure, stock units, your cost of your benefits. So sure, maybe the entire package might be $100K or $120K or whatever. But, just because someone on the internet says that you can get it doesn't mean that it's true. If you take nothing else away, typically the people that are saying that they're trying to sell you something, and you may want to think about that as well. So, really be skeptical of some of the claims out there as well. Ask questions, ask how they have this information, ask where they're getting their data from. And, Tracie hit the nail on the head earlier about the problem with self-reported. There's a ton of research out there that suggests that self-reported data is biased and it lies. Crazy thought, right? Because everyone wants to kind of inflate their ego and make it sound like they're a little bit better off than they are. So I'm just giving you the little cup of skepticism here that, maybe it's 100K total in, but you may also think, is this a bonus eligible position? Is there any stock units that I can negotiate? Do I get extra paid time off, which that's a whole nother bucket and time for a discussion for another day. But, focusing on that, I think, is really critical, because you're right. The people that are in these senior level positions or these positions that pay money, it's high stress. My very first leadership role, I was shocked in a month that I didn't have a Dalmatian and fire truck that come along with it, because I felt like I was putting out fires and problems every single day. And it took a lot of transition from me, and going from an individual contributor to a people manager, it was very stressful, because as an individual contributor, I was in nirvana bliss, building things. Oh, this is great, wonderful. But then managing people, it's like a different problem every hour, every day. Somebody needs this, somebody needs this, somebody needs that. And I've grown to love it, but I'm not going to sugarcoat. That transition was very difficult for me, because I got away from what I enjoy doing, which was development work, to managing people. So that's something that you also maybe want to think about too with your career development.
I love all of that, and I want to ask a question about total rewards and total compensation, because Tracie, I know you've talked about this before, but let me just quickly give you. I want to do my quick soapbox moment about the six-figure thing. I earned total on my total income six figures probably back in 2013, 2014, but it wasn't my base salary. I was also freelancing during my nights and weekends, and I was working 80 hours a week. I didn't earn personally 6 figures as a base salary until I was almost 10 years in my career. And at that point, I was managing a global team of instructional designers. And everything Cara said and everyone else said has said about the responsibilities that come with that are true. My job as a 6-figure earning leader was this much instructional design and this much strategic thinking, and then this much dealing with people's fees, and then this much dealing with HR, and this much dealing with angry stakeholders and subject matter experts. That's why I freelance now, because I realized I did not grow to love it. And so it's important to remember that, yes, of course, I would love it if everybody made 6 figures as a base salary, but know that there's a cost that comes to that. It's taxes, responsibilities, stress, et cetera, et cetera. Tracie, anything you want to add about total rewards now that Cara brought that up? Because that's another important thing that people, I think, are unaware of.
There is a lot in total rewards, and I will gladly chat with anybody offline after this because it's tax season and it's right in front of my face right now. I do work for a tech company, and a lot of companies now offer stock. Stock is considered income. Income gets taxed. Income pushes you into drastically different tax brackets. So what looks good in the offer letter may actually have tax implications, which is why I go back to this. Get a tax advisor. Mm-hmm. Have them a part of, like, if you're going into, like, if you're like, I'm going for one of those big companies where I know they pay X, they're 6 figures. Be strategic. Know that you're actually going to be able to bank and save that. But total compensation as a whole, look at 401k matches, because some teachers' pensions are much better than 401k matches in organizations. So check that out. See what type of retirements they do. Stock options, always a good one, but they come loaded. There are risks and rewards with that. PTO, benefits. For some state agencies offer great health benefits to teachers. Others, not so much. One thing I want to say is know what matters to you most. Pay, benefits, PTO, retirement, or perks. Benefits package. You know, I have 2 kids under the age of 18. So kids always do stupid stuff, always need to use your health plan. So benefits package means a lot to me. And that's where I look, like, when I'm going through, like, I know exactly what I am required to net in order to maintain our lifestyle, but then I want that. And also, if you are not happy with your lifestyle, you will not be happy with your pay, no matter how good or bad it is.
Yeah, pay does not make up for your satisfaction in life or your job.
Yeah. So please balance that out, and just, you honestly have to take a lot of self-reflection before you go into these, because you don't want to run away from something. You want to run towards something. It's a huge mindset shift. Because if you run away from something, you're likely just going to perpetuate that cycle, and you're running into a similarly toxic issue that just pays better. Which still makes it horribly toxic and damaging to you. So please just know what matters to you, and then negotiate for it. Fight for extra PTO, hire this, hire that. Sometimes it's not an extra $2,000 on your paycheck. It is, can I get a higher matching contribution on my 401k? Can I get an extra week of PTO front loaded? Kind of stuff.
Can you get more RSUs, restricted stock units? There's a lot of things you can negotiate. And speaking of PTO, let me just mention, 2 things. RSUs, yes, get an accountant. When I first was issued RSUs, restricted stock units, which is a form of stock options, I had no idea what I was doing. And then years later, I ended up with a very hefty tax bill because nobody explained it to me. And PTO, a lot of companies promote unlimited PTO. Make sure you ask them how those leaders actually live that unlimited PTO, because a lot of companies say, take it when you leave it or take it when you need it. But if it's not used and embodied by those above you, then it ends up being you have it, but nobody uses it. So make sure you ask about that too. Like, how do people actually use it? Okay. Any other tips before we actually, let me ask this. Okay, before we go to our questions, we have a ton of questions coming in. What's your number one advice for salaries, negotiations, anything? If you were to like leave with this one tip, what would it be? Let's go around the table.
I'll start.
Okay.
I've never heard of a job offer being rescinded just because somebody asked to negotiate.
Yes.
The answer won't always be yes, but it's only going to be no if you don't ask.
Yep, I agree with that. Thank you. I like that one. That was mine, so you took mine, so I'll just go with that one. Tracie, Cara, Daila, go ahead. Daila, go ahead.
Sure. I would say that don't always think up when you're looking at salary. I have, in my career, gone up, down, sideways, all around when moving jobs. And it has always been my decision. It hasn't necessarily been, because I got laid off or something like that. So I've been fortunate in that way. But think about what you want to learn and the journey and the path that you're on, right? Because that is ultimately going to affect your happiness with your salary. So it's not necessarily about always one trajectory. It's more about your holistic journey in your profession and what makes sense.
Good. Thank you, Daila.
My one piece of advice would be if they aren't willing to give you a salary range, walk away.
Good.
That company is not willing to be transparent or authentic with you long term. And it started right there in that call. So walk away.
Yeah, they're showing you who they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. And Cara?
Yeah, mine was actually similar to Delia's, but have that leader earn you. A bad leader can make or break any position that you are in, and make sure that you are being equally, that you're really researching and asking that leader questions because this person is really going to be influential in your life. When I pivoted to my first leadership position, my friend Jonathan Rock said something to me that was pretty scary, but it stuck with me ever since. He said, "Now you're the person that people talk at their dinner table about." I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's kind of scary. But, money is one thing, but, your happiness can't be bought and your balance can't be bought. So make sure that you are really doing your due diligence on that leader in the organization to make sure that they have earned you.
Yeah. I'll give my tip. Now I was thinking about it. My tip is to be excruciatingly transparent. If you have a question and you want to earn a certain figure, or just say it. Just be excruciatingly transparent and expect them to be excruciatingly transparent back with you. And if not, then that tells you a lot of what you need to know, and maybe you just dodged a bullet. Okay. Great. Okay, so the second half of this is we're going to just dive into questions. So over the last hour, several people have been submitting questions, and we're going to tackle them in the order in which received the most votes. So our first one comes from Katie. And Katie wants to know, and we were just talking about this a little bit, for positions that don't post the salary, how do you recommend asking for that information before applying? Any tips there?
I think it's been harder and harder to do this because with a lot more candidates looking at jobs, a lot of companies have gone, more automatic in their process of sourcing candidates initially. But if there is a hiring manager that is attached to that job description and they actually have contact information and it's a real person you can connect with, I have definitely just sent an email before I applied to the job just to say, hey, saw your position, really intrigued by it, have a couple of really quick questions to see if we're on the same page. Would really appreciate your time, and then if that's salary based or whether it, is there a potential for remote or not? That's the question that I asked when I reached out. But doing something like that has two benefits. Number one, get your questions answered. Number two, makes you stand out from the rest of the pack and establishes early on a relationship with that hiring manager. And you can start to, really kind of deepen that discussion with them, which makes you more sticky to them as you go through the process.
Yep. I like that. Thank you. Anyone else? Tracie? I don't know if you were raising your hand. Sorry.
I was thinking if somebody emailed me directly, I'd be like, no. Like through that, I would be like, go through the process. And that's the old HR lady in me kicking out. But one thing too is look around and go to your, especially if it's a local role, go to your local ATD chapter. Ask if they know anybody who works there, or network, find them and be like, what's the pay like at such and such? Like,
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed, like us trainers at an ATD meeting will just like nonstop, and you will share, and that's your in. That's someone who can then go to the manager and give you a referral link to apply, because those referral links get to a recruiter quicker than the application ATS link. They all will go to a recruiter for the most part, but you get to the top of the pile through a referral link.
Yeah. Reach out to, you don't have to reach out to the hiring manager. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to the hiring manager, find out who might work on that team and maybe offer a coffee or hop on Zoom. People are willing to share information, and you just have to be strategic about how you ask for it. Any other tips on that before we do our next question? Okay. All right, so our next question comes from Leticia. Leticia wants to know, what is the best way to negotiate salary when you want to work 100% remote? Do companies pay based on your location or theirs? I'm going to say probably depends on the company, but any thoughts? Or I see Laurel, you're lighting up, so go ahead, Laurel.
I would say this is another one. It's really going to vary company by company. I've definitely heard of some organizations that pay differently depending on the geography the person is based in. And I've heard of some companies that don't. So unfortunately, this is one where it's going to be different in every different case.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. It depends. Easy peasy. It's gonna depend. It is. You feel that out for that company, and then negotiate from there. All right. Our next one comes from Ashley. What kind of certification is more marketable in the workforce? Are self-paced online courses credible? What, as hiring managers, do you care about what certifications people have on their LinkedIn profile? And are there ones that are more credible than others? I see Cara shaking her head no.
I mean, I personally don't care. I care what you can do with it. And again, I go back to heart. I know that sounds cheesy, but really that is kind of the way that I like to look at it. I've never been like, oh, cool, this person has 50 LinkedIn learning things on their profile. I need to hire them now. I've never thought that, but I also don't think that because you have a master's degree that you're any better than someone that doesn't, or whatever. Now, I did do some research on this a couple of years ago, like in the beginning of the pandemic, and I took a sample of like 100 just random jobs. I think only 2 mentioned the ATD certifications. So I think that may be getting traction maybe more in the future, but I didn't see a big sample of jobs that listed that as a priority. So I think it depends on how that is sold kind of in the future. But yeah, I care what can you do and are you a good human?
Tracie, go ahead.
I have a bit of a soapbox issue on this.
Okay, go ahead. I got my coffee.
Yeah, HR is a mature function. Employee relations, payroll, benefits, but they lump learning and development into one freaking little person who should be able to do everything. We are a mature profession that has lots of roles, lots of variety, lots of depth of experience. Because of that, I think people hiring for learning and development don't know what they don't know. So they're not asking for those things, because if you're on the HR side, they're going to ask you for, like, do you have a pro-side change management? Do you have a PMP for project management? Do you have your SHRM, your SPHR? Like, that means a lot over there. Your benefits certification, your CEB, all of that means a lot on that side. But the cobbler's children have no shoes on this side. We're just like, go ahead. And I think it is one of those. Beginning into instructional design? No, maybe not. But work towards it. Hone your craft. Sharpen your tools. And look at certifications like that as kind of continual development of yourself to make you sharper, brighter, and more competitive, but it won't necessarily be the deal maker in getting a job. but it will be once you get that interview, because you'll be able to speak soundly with a much more cohesive understanding of business when you're as you progress through your career in learning and development.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Diane Elkins, I used to work for her. She owns and runs Artisan eLearning. I used to be their creative director. And the thing she taught me, and this changed the way I view everything when it came to hiring and managing my own team. You know, anybody can turn on a LinkedIn Learning course. You know, it'll auto advance to that next video, and you'll get your certificate at the end of it, regardless of what happened during that LinkedIn Learning course. And online courses, my online courses that I do are the same way. And at the end of the day, hiring managers care about, can you do the things they need you to do right now? And so those are all, certificates are great. Great. Go develop yourself. I love to see you're developing yourself. But 100 certificates, whether it's from a program like mine or LinkedIn Learning or even from ATD, whether or not those are valued is going to depend on whether or not you can actually do the things that were taught in it. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else we want to add on that? Thank you, Ashley. All right. Our next one comes from Angie. Angie wants to know, what is your number one tip for salary negotiations when the job is offered? Number one tip for salary negotiation.
Never immediately take it. Think about it. Say, thank you. I appreciate it. And go home and discuss and consider all of your options, but never immediately take it.
Agreed.
Yeah, sleep on it for at least one night, if not two. I always ask for 2 days. And then during that time, I talk to my friends. I'm a big believer in, getting input from a few trusted advisors, whether you're friends, family, whatnot, and then come up with I'm giving 3 tips instead of 1, sorry.
That's fine.
Then come up with your, what is it that you want? What are you going to ask for? And be reasonable. Don't come back with, I want to make $20,000 more than you offered me. Come on. Think about it from the hiring manager's point of view and be strategic with what you ask for.
Yeah.
I'll go back to everything Tracie said in the conversation around total rewards. There was some great advice there. Beyond just that baseline salary, what else is on the table? How much paid vacation do they give you? What sense did you get of the culture or the vibe? Did it feel warm and inclusive and inviting, or did it feel cold and distant? Do you have the opportunity to work remote if that's important to you? What other compensation factors play in? Is there a bonus? What frequency does the bonus pay out? Is it annual or quarterly? Try and see if you can ask at what consistency does a bonus pay out. I've worked places that promised a bonus and we fell short of receiving it time over time. And I've worked places that offer a bonus and we consistently get it. So try and get a factor for, what all ingredients go into that total rewards conversation, beyond just that baseline salary.
One thing I would say, though, 2 things. If it's what you want, cool. Mm-hmm. Don't negotiate. Take it. Mm-hmm. Don't feel bad. Don't feel like you have to nickel and dime them for a little extra. If it's right where you need it to be, go for it. But also remember, in the total compensation, reserve stock units, bonuses can all disappear tomorrow. Make sure your base salary covers your expenses and the way you want to live. A wise woman once told me, total rewards is really awesome, but base salary is going to keep a roof over your head and the water hot. And that's what you have to remember.
Yep. I'll add my tips. I think Laurel, you said this earlier. You've never seen one rescind, or Daila might have said this, rescinded an offer because you chose to negotiate. I would be hesitant if a company responded and just flatly said, we don't negotiate. It's one thing to say, this is our best offer. It's another thing to say, we just don't negotiate. That's a big turnoff for me. I would be cautious of that. Keep in mind that what you might come back and ask for, depending on how much more you ask, you could be delaying how long it's going to take to finalize that offer. A lot of companies, if you ask more than 10% than what's been offered, it's got to go up to the CFO. I've seen that before. It goes up even higher than that, and they have to sign off on it. And that could add another 2 weeks to that hiring process real easily if it has to go up that high. And keep in mind that both that company also wants to feel like they got a good deal. So if you want 90 and they come back at 85, it's because both sides want to feel like they won. Right, wrong, or otherwise. You come back and you say, I want 100K, and they offered you 85. You're probably not going to just get 100K. You're probably going to end up somewhere in between those two numbers. So be prepared for that. Okay, good. Let's do our next question. Mark that as answered. All right, our next one comes from, let's do Claudine. Claudine wants to know, which is more valuable, an advanced degree or a certificate? Getting a master's versus the CPTD?
Showing up, having the experience, and a good portfolio.
There you go. What can you do?
I would echo that. If we're going straight either or, if it's, you have to have one or the other. I love ATD. I will champion it all day long. I'm a past president of a chapter. However, I will, I see a lot of value in the CPTDs and the APTDs and all of that. However, I'm also a big proponent for an actual accredited degree from an accredited university. So if we're going either or, my money's on the degree from the university. That being said, I see value in both. That being said, it's all in how you use it on the job. The piece of paper alone is not going to be enough to get the offer, to get the salary. You got to have to apply it.
Yeah.
And do the math. I'm 20 years in, and I'm still contemplating, do I want to get a master's degree because I want to just learn? Or do I honestly think it'll impact my compensation? It won't impact my compensation at this point.
Nope.
And it probably wouldn't have in the beginning either, because it's just not yet valued enough in our profession. It's valued in academia and in K through 12, but in corporate America, it doesn't have the same value to it. So please make sure that you're getting the right mileage out of what you're investing in.
Yeah, and if you do, this is the advice I give people. If you're going to go get back and get a master's, great. Know why you're doing it. Know why you are doing it. Don't do it just because you feel like that's what everyone's supposed to do. I can't tell you how many people I've seen go to college because that's just what they thought they were supposed to do without doing it in an informed way. Our industry is shifting away from just credentials-based hiring, meaning years of experience or education. They're hiring more like they would hire a freelancer, caring about what you can do. As a freelancer, I've never, ever had a client go, can you tell me about your job history? Can you tell me about your degree? I used to catch frickin' shoplifters for a living, and I have a degree in criminal justice. They care that I can do the thing that I need them to do, or they need me to do right now. At the end of the day, that's what matters. That's my soapbox. Sorry, go ahead if anyone else is going to say anything.
Going back to total rewards, if your employer offers tuition reimbursement, that's a great benefit to take advantage of, honestly, Yeah. But when it comes down to investing tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket, you may or may not see that ROI in your salary.
Absolutely. All right. Our next question comes from Alex. Alex wants to know what skill, my contacts usually go weird at this point, so I have to lean in. What skills work do you want to see demonstrated in order to attain higher paying roles like senior or manager? Let me kick this one off because this is a question I had from somebody recently that desperately wanted to become, go into L&D in a leadership role. And they kept asking me, what should I put in my portfolio if that's what I want to get? And I kept telling them, well, at that role, they're not looking for a portfolio. They're looking for different skills. So what are those skills that you want demonstrated for higher level senior roles?
Business consultation. You need strategic leadership. You need business acumen. Basically, everything you would need to be a successful consultant and run your own personal business. You need to do that on a bigger scale. And you have to start thinking full talent predictions, where are we short? How are we hiring? What can we reskill? What can we upskill? I mean, it's more focused on your management and your strategic acumen than it is on your craft. You step so far away from your craft as you start to get into leadership roles.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, the easiest way I differentiate it is you are no longer reactive to the business, but you're proactive to the business. That's an easy way to tell, but entry level versus a more senior level.
That's great.
Yeah,
I'm
and I
stealing
think
that.
too, kind of on that, I love that point, Cara. And I think, it is, you lose that safety net of being able to go to your manager and say, help me with ABC, I don't know what to do, right? The expectation is you may still have a manager, but you're coming to that manager with this happened, this is my plan, I will get back to you at this result, blah, 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 blah. Like it's on you to figure out your problems.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I first interviewed for a leadership role, the questions were, how would you manage this poor performer? How would you manage this business related issue strategically? What results did you get from your strategy and your initiatives? It wasn't about, can you apply ADDIE and do a needs analysis, right? Or do you remember the 5 steps of ADDIE, right? It wasn't that. It was, it was more about you as a leader. So I don't know. I hope that answers some of those questions, Alex. Okay. This one comes from Carla. Carla wants to know, what experiences, skills do you think would make someone a strong candidate to transition into corporate instructional design from higher education? And I'm also going to add teaching in that when they've never done that before.
As somebody who transitioned from higher education back into corporate, I would say the biggest transition, well, a couple things. One, the pace is so much faster. Higher ed, I would maybe crank out, 3 to 4 courses a year, but those are full, long academic courses versus it's a different fire every day in a corporate environment. But second is just, I would say, the autonomy and power of the whole project. My experience in higher education is that faculty member was the end all be all and the owner of the learning experience. So while I could provide guidance, ultimately at the end of the day, whatever I advised or would do, if they didn't like it, they didn't have to do it. Whereas in corporate, like, you are the kind of that expert who is the gatekeeper for that learning experience, and like, you kind of own everything. So getting some experience and building some capacity around that, I think, would help you transition a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think your ability to handle shifting priorities and your ability to speak to that and give examples, because that's the thing in corporate, is what the plan is on Monday is often not the plan by Friday. And you have to be able to shift gears really quickly without getting your feathers too ruffled, while still probably meeting the deadlines that the plan on Monday had. But Friday's plan is with, oh yeah, by the way, there's now 50% more work added to this. So it's being able to take things in stride, handle shifting priorities. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with what Cara said about the fast pace, and this has been my own experience. I will never have a faster paced, more challenging job than teaching 9th grade English. And I say that now as a manager of 9 people. And, I think that, if I could give some encouragement to the teachers out there, who are looking to make this transition, you have the skills, you have the knowledge. I hate to keep harping on degrees. That may be an unpopular opinion here, but you have a degree in education. So, you have a really great foundation in learning theory and what works. And you have years of practical applications of creating content in front of a real live audience who will challenge you to your face and throw things at you and you turn your back to it on the board. And that just doesn't happen in the corporate setting, and so you have a lot of transferable skills, but the burden is going to be on you to convince the hiring manager that your skills are in fact transferable. That's been my biggest challenge in reinventing myself in my career journey. And I've seen many others who just really struggle to get that first interview and to get that first foot in the door somewhere, because corporate managers and corporate recruiters don't always see the value in what you've done. So as much as you can, I hate to say it, but translate the jargon from one industry to the other, you can certainly look for resources and guides on this, through even places like Google. But you have the skills, you have the knowledge, you've done incredibly demanding, incredibly challenging jobs. It is a different context and it is a different setting. But I After I had my team really filled out with really highly skilled, highly experienced senior designers, I very intentionally hired 3 newbies, 2 coming out of secondary education and 1 coming out of higher ed, and they've hit the ground running because they have those skills and they have that knowledge. That they're just learning to work in a new environment is really all it comes down to.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tracie. I want to give a shout out. I did a year of student teaching, and I knew immediately that I didn't like the parents. The kids are fine. It was the parents. I didn't want to have to deal with 2 sets of angry folks. So kudos to everyone who actually saw it through, because I was like cut and run. But I want to also make a pitch for the diversity of learning and development. Yeah. You have more skills than instructional design. Mm-hmm. You just spent a year and a half, maybe even some of you 2 years now, doing virtual facilitation and virtual production. Maybe you set up the Canvas instance at your ISD and you've been managing that LMS. You could go into an LMS admin role. Like, there is more out there than just instructional design, and the starting pay in those entry-level roles are all about the same. Like, let us bring you to our side of the house. I'm more of a non-instructional design person because I focus in the learning ecosystem space and learning reorgs. But there's a wealth of roles here. So even if you're trying to square peg, round hole yourself into instructional design, know that you could talk with any of us through social media or whatever, and we can help you find those other roles in L&D that still ignite your passion, but are better suited for a skill set that you may have developed over the past 2 to 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, very good. All right, we're at our last minute, so I think we'll leave it there. If we weren't able to get to your question, I apologize. We had a ton of questions come in. So here's what I want to say. Obviously, I want to thank my panel for joining me today, but where can people connect with you online if they would like to ask questions or get your advice or anything? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn.
I think that's the easiest one. Yes, LinkedIn. Some of us are on Twitter. Google us. Well, very good. Well, like I said, I want to thank everybody. I hope this time was helpful for everybody. And like I said at the top of today's session, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell button. Otherwise, until next month, I'll see you all around. And thank you to my panel for joining me today, and have a great rest of your day and week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.